Sarah Williams had been cleaning houses for 37 years, and in all that time she had never taken so much as a paperclip that didn't belong to her. Her grandmother had taught her that honest work was the only kind worth doing, and her mother had reinforced that lesson every day until Sarah was old enough to understand it in her bones. At 54 years old, Sarah moved through the Hartwell mansion with the same careful attention she had given every house she'd ever cleaned. The marble floors gleamed under her cloth, the crystal chandeliers sparkled without a single smudge, and every surface in the 12-bedroom house reflected her dedication to doing things right. The Hartwell family had been good to her, better than most, if she was being honest. When other wealthy families in the neighborhood treated their help like furniture, Dr. James Hartwell and his wife Rebecca actually remembered her name. They asked about her own children, remembered her birthday, and had even helped her oldest daughter with college application essays 3 years ago. Dr. Hartwell was a cardiac surgeon at the city's most prestigious hospital, known for his steady hands and calm demeanor in the operating room. His wife, Rebecca, managed their social calendar and charity work, with the same precision her husband used to repair human hearts. They were important people, the kind who appeared in the society pages of the newspaper and whose opinions mattered at city council meetings. Their only son, Michael, had just turned 19 and was finishing his first year at Princeton. Sarah had watched him grow up, had bandaged his scraped knees when he was 7, had listened to his teenage complaints about algebra homework, and had celebrated with the family when his acceptance letter arrived. To her, he wasn't just the boss's son. He was almost like family. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. Sarah arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, letting herself in through the service entrance with the key Dr. Hartwell had given her 5 years ago. The house was quiet, with only the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. She began her routine in the kitchen, wiping down the counters that were already clean and organizing the fresh flowers Mrs. Hartwell had arranged the day before. The morning light streaming through the tall windows caught the dust motes dancing in the air, and Sarah methodically eliminated each speck with her cloth. At 8:30, she heard Dr. Hartwell's footsteps on the stairs. This was unusual. Normally, he left for the hospital by 7:15, and Mrs. Hartwell didn't emerge from her bedroom until at least 9. Sarah glanced at the clock, wondering if she had somehow mixed up the time. When Dr. Hartwell entered the kitchen, Sarah immediately knew something was wrong. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie hung loose around his neck, and his eyes had the red-rimmed look of someone who hadn't slept. In all her years working for the family, she had never seen him look anything less than completely composed. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse. He moved to the coffee maker with unsteady hands, nearly dropping the glass pot. "Dr. Hartwell, sir. Are you all right?" Sarah set down her cleaning cloth and took a step toward him. "You don't look well." He turned to face her, and she could see tears threatening to spill from his eyes. This was a man who performed life-saving surgery under pressure, who spoke at medical conferences in front of hundreds of colleagues who had never shown even the smallest crack in his professional demeanor. Seeing him like this felt almost wrong, like witnessing something too private. "It's Michael," he said, and his voice broke on his son's name. "We got a call last night from Princeton. He's in the hospital there." Sarah's heart clenched. "What happened? Is he hurt?" Dr. Hartwell sank into one of the kitchen chairs, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. "He collapsed during basketball practice. They rushed him to the emergency room, ran tests." He paused, struggling to find the words. "He needs surgery, Sarah, immediately. There's something wrong with his heart." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Dr. Hartwell, who had spent his entire career fixing other people's hearts, couldn't operate on his own son. The emotional connection, the shaking hands, the fear, it would make surgery impossible. "The doctors at Princeton Hospital are good," Dr. Hartwell continued. But they're not specialists in this particular condition. There's a surgeon in Boston, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who's performed this exact procedure dozens of times. She's the best in the country for this type of repair. Sarah sat down across from him, forgetting for a moment about the boundary between employer and employee. That sounds like good news. When can she operate? Dr. Hartwell's face crumpled. She can do it next week, but the surgery costs $250,000, and our insurance? He stopped, shaking his head. Our insurance company is calling it experimental. They won't cover it. They want Michael to have the surgery here, with a less experienced team, using an older technique that has a much lower success rate. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. $250,000. She couldn't even imagine what that much money would look like all in one place. Her yearly salary was barely $28,000, and she had to stretch every penny to make ends meet. "But you're a doctor," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "Surely you have savings." "We do," Dr. Hartwell said bitterly. "But not nearly enough. We've got maybe $60,000 in liquid assets. The house is worth a lot, but we'd need months to sell it. And Michael needs surgery now. Next week or the window closes." He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the perfectly manicured back garden. "I've called everyone. My colleagues, Rebecca's family, the bank. I can get loans for maybe another $100,000, but that still leaves us $90,000 short. $90,000 between my son's life and—" He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah felt helpless, watching this strong man crumble before her eyes. She wanted to help, but what could she possibly do? Her checking account had $347 in it. Her savings account had another $800. The most valuable thing she owned was her 15-year-old Honda Civic, which might be worth $3,000 on a good day. "What about GoFundMe?" she suggested. "People raise money online all the time now." Dr. Hartwell gave her a sad smile. "We started one yesterday. Rebecca's been calling every person in her contact list. So far, we've raised $12,000. It's generous. More generous than I ever expected, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Mrs. Hartwell appeared in the doorway, still in her bathrobe. Her usual elegance was gone, replaced by the raw exhaustion of a mother watching her child suffer. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she clutched a tissue in her trembling hand. "James, we need to get to the airport," she said, her voice hollow. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. Sarah stood up, instinctively moving to give them space for what was clearly a private family crisis. But Mrs. Hartwell caught her arm gently. "Sarah, I'm sorry you have to see us like this," she said. "We're flying to Princeton to be with Michael. The house, just leave everything as it is. We don't know when we'll be back." "Don't worry about the house, Mrs. Hartwell," Sarah said firmly. "I'll take care of everything. You focus on Michael." After they left, the house felt different. The silence was heavier, filled with worry and fear instead of the usual peaceful quiet. Sarah tried to continue her normal routine, but her mind kept drifting to Michael. She remembered him as a little boy, racing through these same rooms with his toy cars, leaving a trail of chaos that she would patiently clean up. She thought about the teenager who had sheepishly asked her not to tell his parents about the small dent he'd put in his mother's car. She pictured the young man who had hugged her goodbye before leaving for college, thanking her for everything she had done for their family over the years. As she dusted the family photos in the living room, she stopped at one taken the previous Christmas. Michael stood between his parents, tall and healthy, his smile bright with the confidence of someone who believed the world was full of possibilities. Looking at that photo, she felt something shift inside her chest. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the television without really seeing it. Her own children were grown and lived in other states, and her husband had passed away 6 years ago. The Hartwells were the closest thing to family she had in this city. She thought about Dr. Hartwell's broken voice, Mrs. Hartwell's desperate eyes, and somewhere in Princeton, Michael lying in a hospital bed, waiting for a surgery that might never come. The unfairness of it all made her angry. Good people, people who had worked hard and played by the rules, were being destroyed by a medical system that put profit over patients. Over the next 3 days, Sarah continued to clean the empty house, but her mind was always elsewhere. She found herself in Dr. Hartwell's study more often than usual, dusting the same bookshelf multiple times. The study was where he kept his important papers, where he handled the family's finances. She wasn't snooping, she told herself. She was just doing her job. But she couldn't help noticing things. The stack of medical bills on his desk, the loan applications with their red denied stamps, the printout of their GoFundMe page showing that donations had slowed to a trickle. On Friday morning, her phone rang while she was organizing the linen closet. "Sarah?" It was Mrs. Hartwell, calling from Princeton. Her voice sounded even more strained than when she had left. "Yes, ma'am. How is Michael?" He's getting worse. The doctors here want to operate immediately using their technique, but James spoke to Dr. Rodriguez again yesterday. She thinks the traditional approach only has a 60% success rate for Michael's specific condition. Her technique has a 95% success rate. The difference between 60 and 95%. The difference between her boy living or dying, all because of money. "We're not giving up," Mrs. Hartwell continued, but Sarah could hear the defeat creeping into her voice. "We've got until Monday to decide. If we can't raise the money by then, we'll have to go with the local surgery and hope for the best." After hanging up, Sarah sat on the hallway floor, surrounded by perfectly folded sheets and towels, and cried. She cried for Michael, for his parents, and for the terrible unfairness of a world where money determined whether a 19-year-old lived or died. That's when she remembered the safe. It was hidden behind a painting in Dr. Hartwell's study, and Sarah had discovered it purely by accident 2 years ago, when she was cleaning the frame and had bumped it slightly off-center. She hadn't meant to see it, and she certainly hadn't meant to watch Dr. Hartwell open it later that day. But she had been dusting in the hallway when he came home early, and she had seen him enter the combination, Michael's birthday, followed by his and Rebecca's wedding anniversary. She had never thought about the safe again. It wasn't her business what the Hartwells kept there, and she had trained herself to be invisible when it came to her employer's private affairs. But now, sitting on the floor with Mrs. Hartwell's desperate voice echoing in her ears, she couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, Sarah lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. She knew she was thinking about something terrible, something that went against every principle she had lived by for 54 years. But she also knew that somewhere in Princeton, a boy who called her Aunt Sarah was lying in a hospital bed, running out of time. She thought about her own children, how she would move mountains to save them if they were in danger. She thought about the Hartwells, who had treated her with respect and kindness for 8 years. She thought about right and wrong, about the law and about love, about the difference between stealing and saving a life. By Saturday morning, she had made her decision. It was wrong, it was illegal, and it would probably destroy her life. But if it could save Michael's life, she was prepared to pay that price. The plan formed slowly in her mind as she went through her weekend. She would wait until Monday morning when she knew for certain that the Hartwells were still in Princeton. She would go to the house as usual, do her regular cleaning routine, and then she would open the safe. She had no idea how much money Dr. Hartwell kept there, but she hoped it would be enough to make a difference. She told herself she was borrowing it, not stealing it. Once Michael was healthy and the family was back home, she would confess everything and work out a way to pay them back, even if it took the rest of her life. She would accept whatever consequences came with her actions, whether that meant jail time or simply being fired and blacklisted from ever working in domestic service again. Sunday night, she didn't sleep at all. She sat in her kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the clock, waiting for Monday morning to arrive. She had never committed a crime in her life, had never even gotten a speeding ticket. The thought of what she was about to do made her sick to her stomach. But the thought of Michael dying because she did nothing was worse. At 6:30 Monday morning, she called Mrs. Hartwell. "How is he?" she asked without preamble. "The same. We have until 4 o'clock this afternoon to decide about the surgery. If we don't have the money for Dr. Rodriguez by then, we'll have to schedule the local surgery for tomorrow." Sarah closed her eyes. 4 o'clock. She had 9.5 hours. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm going to pray for a miracle today." After she hung up, Sarah Williams, who had never taken anything that didn't belong to her, drove to the Hartwell mansion to commit the biggest theft of her life. Sarah's hands shook as she inserted the key into the Hartwell mansion's service entrance. The familiar click of the lock seemed louder than usual in the morning silence, and she found herself looking over her shoulder even though she knew the street was empty. She had been using this key for 5 years, but today it felt like she was breaking into a stranger's house. The morning routine felt surreal. She hung her coat in the same closet, put on her cleaning apron, and gathered her supplies from the utility room. Everything was exactly as she had left it on Friday, but she moved through the familiar motions like she was sleepwalking. Her mind kept jumping between what she was about to do and the phone call she had received from Mrs. Hartwell an hour earlier. "We've raised another $8,000 over the weekend," Mrs. Hartwell had said, exhaustion clear in her voice. "That brings us to $20,000 total. James has been on the phone with the bank again, but they won't extend our credit any further. We're still $60,000 short, and Dr. Rodriguez needs confirmation by 4 o'clock today." $60,000. The number echoed in Sarah's mind as she mechanically dusted the living room furniture. She had no idea if Dr. Hartwell kept that much cash in his safe, but she had to try. The alternative was unthinkable. At 10 o'clock, she forced herself to eat a sandwich she had brought from home, though it tasted like cardboard. Her stomach was churning with anxiety, and she had to pause twice to breathe deeply and calm her racing heart. She had never been good at lying or hiding things, and she was terrified that somehow her intentions would be written across her face for everyone to see. By 11:30, she couldn't put it off any longer. She walked to Dr. Hartwell's study, her footsteps echoing in the empty house. The study smelled like his cologne and old leather books, familiar and comforting smells that made what she was about to do feel even more wrong. The painting hung exactly where it always had, an expensive-looking landscape that showed rolling hills and a distant farmhouse. Sarah had dusted its frame hundreds of times over the years, never thinking about what it concealed. Now, she stared at it for a long moment, giving herself one last chance to change her mind. She thought about Michael, probably lying in his hospital bed at that very moment, waiting for news about his future. She thought about Dr. and Mrs. Hartwell, who had trusted her with their house keys, their personal space, their family stories. She thought about her own mother, who would be horrified to know what her daughter was contemplating. But she also thought about the 19-year-old boy who had grown up before her eyes, who had never treated her like she was invisible the way so many employers did. She remembered the day he had come home from school with a black eye, and how he had let her put ice on it while he told her about standing up to bullies who were picking on a smaller kid. That was who Michael was, someone who stood up for others, someone who deserved the chance to keep being that person. Sarah lifted the painting carefully, setting it on Dr. Hartwell's desk. The safe was smaller than she had expected, maybe the size of a shoebox, built directly into the wall. The electronic keypad glowed softly, waiting for the combination she had accidentally memorized 2 years ago. Her fingers trembled as she entered the numbers. 0321, Michael's birthday, March 21st. Then 0615 for June 15th, Dr. and Mrs. Hartwell's wedding anniversary. She had seen him enter these numbers only once, but they were burned into her memory. The safe clicked open. Sarah stared at the contents, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. There were several stacks of bills held together with rubber bands, a few official-looking documents, and a small velvet jewelry box. With shaking hands, she lifted out the money. The first stack was all $100 bills, thick enough that she estimated it contained at least $5,000. The second stack was similar, and the third. There was a fourth stack of 50s and 20s, and at the bottom, a manila envelope that felt heavy with more cash. She sat on the floor of the study, methodically counting money she had no right to touch. The total came to $47,800. More money than she had ever seen in one place, more than she made in 2 years of work, but still not enough to save Michael's life. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Even if she took every penny in the safe, even if she destroyed her own life and betrayed the people who trusted her, it still wouldn't be enough. The Hartwells would still be $13,000 short of what they needed for Michael's surgery. She sat on the floor, surrounded by money that wasn't hers, money that represented someone else's security and emergency fund, and she began to cry. All of this, the crime she was committing, the trust she was betraying, the life she was destroying, and it still wouldn't be enough to save the boy she loved like her own child. For a moment, she considered putting everything back and pretending none of this had ever happened. She could replace the painting, go back to her cleaning, and call Mrs. Hartwell to offer whatever small comfort she could. She could let the Hartwells make their impossible choice about Michael's surgery, and she could keep her integrity intact. But then she thought about Dr. Hartwell's broken voice when he said his son's name, and she knew she couldn't do nothing. $47,000 might not be the full amount they needed, but it was close enough that maybe, somehow, they could find the rest. Maybe another family member could contribute, or maybe Dr. Rodriguez would accept partial payment. Or maybe a miracle would happen. She began taking the money, all of it, every bill, every stack, every dollar that might make a difference in whether Michael lived or died. She stuffed it into the large cleaning supply bag she had brought with her, her movements quick and desperate. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely manage the rubber bands. When the safe was empty except for the documents and jewelry box, she closed it and rehung the painting. She stood back to make sure it looked exactly as it had before, adjusting the frame until it hung at precisely the same angle. If Dr. Hartwell didn't open the safe for several days, maybe she would have time to figure out what to do next. The weight of the money in her bag felt enormous as she walked through the house, finishing her cleaning routine on autopilot. She wiped down surfaces she had already cleaned, organized already organized closets, and checked rooms that didn't need checking. She was desperate to maintain the illusion of normalcy, but her heart was racing with guilt and fear. At 2:30, she called Mrs. Hartwell from the house phone, using the same number she had been calling for 8 years. "Mrs. Hartwell, it's Sarah. I've been thinking about Michael all day, and I want to help." "Oh, Sarah, that's so sweet of you, but there's nothing—" "I have some money," Sarah interrupted, the lie coming easier than she had expected. "It's not much, but it's everything I have. I want to give it to Michael's surgery fund." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Sarah wondered if the connection had been lost. "Sarah," Mrs. Hartwell finally said. Her voice choked with emotion. "That's incredibly generous, but we couldn't possibly accept—" "You can and you will," Sarah said firmly. "This family has been good to me for 8 years. You've been more than employers, you've been family, and family helps family." "How much are you talking about?" Mrs. Hartwell asked quietly. Sarah took a deep breath. This was where the lies would begin in earnest, where she would have to look these people in the eye and deceive them about something that would change all their lives forever. $47,000, she said. The gasp on the other end of the line was audible. Sarah, that's impossible. There's no way you have that kind of money. I do, Sarah insisted. I've been saving for 25 years. It was supposed to be for my retirement. But what good is retirement money if people I care about are suffering now? I want Michael to have that surgery. Mrs. Hartwell was crying now. Sarah could hear it in her voice. Sarah, I don't know what to say. $47,000. That would put us so close. James might be able to get a short-term loan for the final $13,000. Oh my God, do you really mean this? I mean it, Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I can wire the money this afternoon. The next hour passed in a blur of phone calls. Mrs. Hartwell called her husband, who immediately called the bank about emergency loan options. Sarah called her own bank, claiming she needed to wire money to her nephew for emergency medical expenses. She had to transfer money from multiple accounts, including her actual savings and her checking account, to make the story believable. The bank manager looked surprised when Sarah requested such a large wire transfer, but her account history showed steady deposits and minimal withdrawals over many years. To him, it probably looked like a woman who had been saving diligently finally accessing her nest egg for a family emergency. By 4 o'clock, the money had been wired to Dr. Rodriguez's office in Boston, along with an additional $15,000 that Dr. Hartwell had managed to secure through an emergency loan using his medical practice as collateral. Michael's surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Sarah drove home that evening, feeling like she was living in someone else's life. She had committed a felony theft, lied to people who trusted her, and set in motion events that would inevitably destroy her when the truth came out. But she had also saved Michael's life, and that knowledge gave her a strange sense of peace, even as it terrified her. Her phone rang at 8 o'clock. It was Mrs. Hartwell calling from Boston. Sarah, I can't stop crying, she said. What you did today, there are no words for it. You saved our son's life. You gave up your entire future so that Michael could have his. Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of the deception crushing down on her. I just did what anyone would do for family. No, Mrs. Hartwell said firmly. Not anyone would do what you did. Most people would offer sympathy, maybe a few $100s, but you gave everything. We're going to pay you back, of course. Every penny with interest. Don't worry about that now, Sarah said. Just focus on Michael. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her small living room, looking around at the modest furniture and worn carpet that had been her world for the past 6 years since her husband's death. Soon, it would all be gone. When Dr. Hartwell eventually opened his safe, when he discovered what she had done, she would lose everything. Her job, her reputation, her freedom, all of it would disappear. But Michael would be alive. That had to be enough. The next morning, Mrs. Hartwell called to say the surgery had gone perfectly. Michael was in recovery, and Dr. Rodriguez was confident about his full recovery. Sarah listened to the joy in Mrs. Hartwell's voice and felt her own heart break with relief and guilt in equal measure. For 3 days, she continued cleaning the empty Hartwell house, living with the secret that felt like a physical weight in her chest. She jumped every time her phone rang, expecting it to be Dr. Hartwell calling to confront her about the missing money. She barely slept, and food had no taste. She was living in the space between the crime and its discovery, and that space was becoming unbearable. On Thursday evening, her phone rang. It was Dr. Hartwell calling from Boston. Sarah, he said, and she could hear exhaustion and joy mixed in his voice. Michael is awake and asking for you. He wants to thank his Aunt Sarah for saving his life. Sarah's heart clenched. How is he feeling? Better than we dared hope. Dr. Rodriguez says his heart is responding beautifully to the repair. He should be able to come home in a few days, and with some rest and rehabilitation, he'll be able to live a completely normal life. That's wonderful news, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, what you did for us. Dr. Hartwell paused, struggling with emotion. I've been thinking about it for days now, trying to find a way to express what it means. You gave us our son back. You gave up everything for people who couldn't possibly deserve such sacrifice. If only you knew, Sarah thought. If only you knew that I gave up nothing that belonged to me. We'll be home Saturday evening, Dr. Hartwell continued. Rebecca and I want to take you to dinner, somewhere nice. We want to talk about how we're going to pay you back, and we want to discuss your future. After what you've done, working as our housekeeper seems insufficient. We want to do something more for you. Saturday evening. That gave her 2 more days of this terrible secret, 2 more days of pretending to be a hero when she was actually a criminal, 2 more days before her world collapsed. That sounds lovely, she managed to say. And Sarah, Dr. Hartwell added, when we get home, I'm going to open my safe and add our insurance settlement from last year to what we owe you. It's about $12,000, and I want you to have it as a bonus for what you've done. Sarah's blood turned to ice. The insurance settlement was sitting in the safe, but the money, her money, their money, stolen money, was gone. When Dr. Hartwell opened that safe on Saturday night, he would discover the truth. Her crime would be revealed, and the family whose son she had saved would learn that their savior was a thief. Dr. Hartwell, she said, her voice barely a whisper. There's something I need to tell you. But the line had gone dead. He had hung up, probably eager to get back to Michael's bedside, never imagining that the woman he was praising as a hero was about to confess to betraying his family's trust in the most fundamental way possible. Sarah stared at her phone, knowing that she had just missed her chance for a controlled confession. Now she would have to wait for Saturday, wait for the safe to be opened, wait for the horrible moment when Dr. Hartwell's gratitude turned to anger and disbelief. She spent Friday night writing a letter, trying to explain her actions, trying to make them understand that she had stolen from them out of love, not greed. She wrote and rewrote it a dozen times, but nothing she could say would change the fact that she had violated their trust and committed a serious crime. Saturday arrived gray and cold, matching Sarah's mood as she drove to the Hartwell house for what she knew would be the last time. They would be home by evening, and by the end of the night, her life as she knew it would be over. She unlocked the door with hands that shook so badly she could barely turn the key. In a few hours, this house would no longer be her workplace. It would be the scene of her crime, the place where she had betrayed the people who had been kinder to her than she deserved. At 6:30 that evening, she heard car doors slamming in the driveway. The Hartwells were home, and Sarah's moment of reckoning had arrived. Sarah heard their voices in the foyer as the Hartwell family returned home. Mrs. Bakersat. Hartwell's laughter rang through the house, light and joyful in a way Sarah hadn't heard in weeks. Dr. Hartwell was telling someone on the phone about Michael's recovery, his voice strong and relieved. And then she heard Michael himself, weak but unmistakably alive, asking if Aunt Sarah was still there. She stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter to keep herself upright. The letter of confession was in her pocket, folded and refolded so many times that the paper was soft as cloth. She had rehearsed what she would say, how she would explain her actions, but now that the moment had arrived, all her carefully planned words seemed inadequate. Sarah! Mrs. Hartwell entered the kitchen first, her face glowing with happiness despite the exhaustion around her eyes. She crossed the room and wrapped Sarah in a hug that smelled like hospital antiseptic and relief. Oh, Sarah, he's going to be fine. Completely fine. Dr. Rodriguez says his heart is stronger than ever. Dr. Hartwell appeared behind his wife, supporting Michael, who looked pale but was walking on his own. The sight of the young man she had watched grow up, alive and recovering, made Sarah's throat close with emotion. Whatever happened next, Whatever consequences she faced, seeing him healthy was worth it all. "Aunt Sarah," Michael said, using the nickname he had called her since childhood, "Mom and Dad told me what you did, how you gave up your retirement money for me." He stepped forward and hugged her gently, mindful of his recent surgery. "I don't know how to thank you." Sarah felt like her heart was breaking and healing at the same time. Here was this wonderful boy, grateful for her sacrifice, having no idea that her gift had come at the cost of his family's trust. She held him for a moment, memorizing the feeling of him alive in her arms, knowing it might be the last time. "I'm just glad you're okay," she whispered. "We all are," Dr. Hartwell said, his voice warm with affection. "And now we need to talk about making things right with you, Sarah. You've given us everything, and we need to figure out how to give some of it back." Mrs. Hartwell nodded enthusiastically. "We've been talking about it all week. James and I want to set up a retirement account for you, something that will give you the security you gave up for us. And we want to discuss changing your role here. After what you've done, having you clean our house feels wrong. We want you to be part of our family officially." Sarah felt the weight of their gratitude like a physical thing, pressing down on her chest until she could barely breathe. They wanted to reward her, honor her, make her family, and all of it was based on a lie that was about to destroy them all. "Let me get the insurance settlement money from the safe," Dr. Hartwell said, heading toward his study. "I want you to have it tonight as a start." Sarah's vision went gray around the edges. This was it, the moment when everything would unravel. "Dr. Hartwell, wait!" she called out, her voice cracking. "Please, before you do that, I need to tell you something." The family turned to look at her, and she could see confusion beginning to replace their happiness. Michael frowned, leaning more heavily against the kitchen island. "Is everything all right?" Mrs. Hartwell asked. Sarah pulled the letter from her pocket, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unfold it. "I need to read you something, and then I think you'll want to call the police." The silence in the kitchen was complete. Dr. Hartwell took a step toward her, his medical instincts probably picking up on her distress. "Sarah, what's going on?" She looked at each of them in turn, Mrs. Hartwell's concerned face, Michael's confused expression, Dr. Hartwell's growing alarm. These people who had been her family, who had trusted her, who were about to learn that everything they thought they knew about her was wrong. "The money I gave you for Michael's surgery," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't my retirement savings. It was yours." Dr. Hartwell went very still. "What do you mean?" "I took it from your safe." The words came out in a rush now, like a dam breaking. "I knew the combination because I accidentally saw you open it 2 years ago. When Mrs. Hartwell called and said you needed $60,000 more, I went to your safe and took everything that was in it. $47,800. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sarah had ever heard. She could see Dr. Hartwell processing her words, could see the exact moment when understanding dawned on his face. Mrs. Hartwell's hand flew to her mouth, and Michael sank into one of the kitchen chairs. "You stole from us," Dr. Hartwell said slowly, as if testing the words. "You stole from us to pay for Michael's surgery." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know how it sounds. I know it's wrong. I've never taken anything that didn't belong to me in my entire life. But Michael needed that surgery and you didn't have enough money, and I thought maybe if I took what was in the safe, it would help save his life. So when we thanked you," Mrs. Hartwell said, her voice hollow, "when we talked about how generous you were lying to us." "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "I'm so sorry. I know there's no excuse for what I did. I know you trusted me, and I betrayed that trust. I know you'll probably never be able to forgive me." Dr. Hartwell walked to his study without a word. Sarah heard the painting being moved, heard the safe opening, heard the moment when he confirmed what she had told him. When he returned to the kitchen, his face was unreadable. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Help me understand this, Sarah. If you had asked us for help, if you had told us you had savings you were willing to contribute, we would have been grateful for any amount. Why steal it? Why lie?" Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because I didn't have any savings. I had $800 to my name, but I couldn't watch Michael die when there was money right here that could save him. I thought maybe if I took it, you could get the rest somewhere else, and then after Michael was better, I would confess and work out a way to pay you back somehow." "Even if it took the rest of your life?" Michael said quietly. "Even if it took the rest of my life." Dr. A. Hartwell sat down across from her at the kitchen table, studying her face like he was trying to solve a complex medical puzzle. "You risked everything. Your job, your freedom, your reputation, for us." "For Michael," Sarah corrected. "I couldn't live with myself if something happened to him and I had done nothing." "But you did steal from us," Mrs. Hartwell said, and Sarah could hear her struggling to reconcile the crime with the motivation. "Yes, I stole from you. I committed a felony. I betrayed your trust. And I would do it again tomorrow if it meant saving Michael's life." The honesty of that statement hung in the air between them. Sarah had expected anger, accusations, demands that she leave immediately. What she hadn't expected was this strange, heavy silence, as the three people she cared most about in the world tried to process what she had done. Dr. Hartwell rubbed his temples, looking older than he had when she first met him. "Sarah, do you understand what you've put us in the position of having to do? You've confessed to stealing nearly $50,000 from us. Legally, we have to report this." Sarah nodded. "I know. I've been expecting you to call the police since the day I took it. I won't fight it. I'll plead guilty and accept whatever punishment I get. I just needed Michael to be okay first." Michael stood up from his chair, still moving carefully, but with more strength than he'd shown when they arrived. "Mom, Dad, can I talk to you privately for a minute?" The three family members stepped into the next room, leaving Sarah alone in the kitchen. She could hear their voices but not their words, and she found herself thinking about her apartment, wondering what would happen to her few possessions when she was arrested. She thought about her children, living in other states, and how she would explain to them that their mother was a criminal. She thought about the other families in the neighborhood who might have hired her, and how they would never trust her again once word got out. But mostly, she thought about Michael, alive and arguing with his parents in the next room. Whatever happened to her, he was going to live. He was going to grow up, graduate from college, maybe get married and have children of his own. The money she had stolen had bought him that future, and no amount of punishment could make her regret that. When the family returned to the kitchen, their faces were serious but not angry. Dr. Hartwell sat down across from Sarah again, and Mrs. Hartwell took the seat next to him. Michael remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest. "Sarah," Dr. Hartwell began, "what you did was wrong. It was illegal, and it was a violation of our trust. But Michael has reminded us of something important." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You didn't steal for personal gain. You didn't take our money to buy yourself something nice or to pay off your own debts. You stole it to save our son's life, and you were prepared to spend the rest of your own life paying the consequences." "That doesn't make it legal," Sarah said quietly. "No, it doesn't," Mrs. Hartwell agreed. "But it makes it complicated in a way that has nothing to do with the law." Michael stepped forward. "Aunt Sarah, what if you had asked us for permission? What if you had come to us and said, 'I know where you keep emergency money, and I think we should use it for my surgery'? What would we have said?" Sarah looked up at him, confused by the question. "You would have said yes, of course?" "Exactly," Dr. Hartwell said. "We would have opened that safe ourselves and given you every penny in it if we had thought about it. In our panic, we never even considered using our emergency fund. We were so focused on liquid assets and loans that we forgot about the cash we kept for true emergencies. Mrs. Hartwell reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. So, in a strange way, you didn't really steal from us. You used our money the way we would have used it ourselves if we had been thinking clearly. But I didn't have permission, Sarah protested. I made that choice for you. You made the choice we would have made, Michael said firmly. The choice we should have made ourselves if we hadn't been too scared to think straight. Dr. Hartwell stood up and began pacing the kitchen. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah. We're not calling the police. We're not pressing charges. We're not firing you. What happened here stays between us. Sarah stared at him in shock. I don't understand. Rebecca and I have talked about this, and Michael helped us see something we almost missed, Dr. Hartwell continued. You didn't commit a crime against us. You committed an act of love for our family. An act that saved our son's life. But the law doesn't always account for love, Mrs. Hartwell said softly. Sometimes there are situations where the right thing to do and the legal thing to do don't match up. Michael sat down next to Sarah and took her other hand. Aunt Sarah, you've been part of our family for 8 years. You've taken care of our house, but more than that, you've taken care of us. And when it mattered most, when my life was on the line, you took care of me the way a family member would. What you did was criminal, Dr. Hartwell said, his voice gentle but serious. But it was also heroic, and we're going to choose to see it as heroic. Sarah felt like the world was tilting off its axis. You're not going to turn me in? We're not going to turn in the woman who saved our son's life, Mrs. Hartwell said firmly. But we are going to make some changes around here. Dr. Hartwell nodded. First, we're setting up a retirement account for you with enough money to replace what you claim to have spent on Michael's surgery. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your security for ours. Second, Mrs. Hartwell continued, we're changing your role here. You're not going to be our housekeeper anymore. You're going to be our family manager. Better pay, better benefits, and official recognition of what you've always been to us. And third, Michael added, grinning for the first time since they'd come home, we're updating our emergency protocols. From now on, if there's ever a crisis in this family, we all put our heads together and figure out solutions. No more panic. No more forgetting about resources we have available. Sarah looked around the kitchen at these 3 people who had every right to be angry with her, every reason to feel betrayed and violated. Instead, they were offering her forgiveness, security, and a place in their family that went beyond employment. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Maybe not, Dr. Hartwell said with a small smile. But Michael deserved to live, and you made sure he got that chance. That matters more to us than any money ever could. Mrs. Hartwell squeezed her hand. Sarah, what you did was wrong, but why you did it was right, and we're going to choose to focus on the why. 6 months later, Sarah Williams sat in the Hartwell family's kitchen on a Sunday morning, reading the newspaper while Michael practiced piano in the living room. His recovery had been complete, and he was back at Princeton, home for the weekend to visit family. She was no longer their housekeeper. Her new title was Family Coordinator, and her responsibilities included managing the household staff, organizing family schedules, and serving as a liaison for family business. The pay was 3 times what she had made cleaning houses, and the Hartwells had set up a retirement account that would ensure her security. More importantly, she was family now in every way that mattered. She had her own room in the house, took meals with the Hartwells, and was included in family decisions and celebrations. When people asked Dr. and Mrs. Hartwell about their unusual household arrangement, they simply said that Sarah had been with them for so long she was like a sister, which was as close to the truth as they could get without telling the whole story. The safe in Dr. Hartwell's study now contained documents and jewelry, but no cash. They had learned their lesson about emergency preparedness and kept their emergency funds in easily accessible accounts instead of hidden behind paintings. Sarah had never asked what Dr. Hartwell had thought that night when he first opened the empty safe, but she suspected he had understood what she had done before she even confessed. Sometimes, late at night, she still thought about what she had done. The theft, the lies, the violation of trust that had started it all. She couldn't change those things, couldn't make them unhappen, but she had learned something about the complicated relationship between right and wrong, between love and law, between the choices we make and the lives those choices affect. Michael was alive. He was thriving at college, had joined the debate team, and planned to major in pre-med like his father. He called her every Sunday and sent her pictures of his campus, his friends, his life that almost wasn't. When people asked him about the scar on his chest, he told them about the amazing surgeon who had saved his life, but he never mentioned the woman who had made that surgery possible. The secret of what had happened that week in March belonged to the four of them alone. Dr. Hartwell had sealed the hospital records, and the money trail had been carefully obscured through the family's financial transactions. To the outside world, it looked like the Hartwells had simply used their emergency funds and taken out loans to pay for Michael's surgery, with help from their loyal employees' generous donation. Sarah had never confessed the truth to anyone else, not even her own children. The weight of what she had done was hers to carry, along with the knowledge of what that choice had made possible. It was a heavy burden, but it was one she accepted willingly. That Sunday morning, as she listened to Michael play a Chopin piece he was learning, she reflected on how different their lives would have been if she had made a different choice that day in March. If she had decided that stealing was wrong no matter the circumstances. If she had let fear of consequences override her love for the boy she considered family. Michael would probably be dead, or at best permanently disabled from a surgery that hadn't been quite good enough. The Hartwell family would be destroyed by grief and medical bills, and Sarah herself would still be cleaning other people's houses, wondering if she could have done something to save a life and choosing to preserve her own reputation instead. Dr. Hartwell entered the kitchen, already dressed for his morning run. "Good morning, Sarah. Sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," she replied, the same exchange they had shared every Sunday for 6 months. "Michael sounds good on the piano," he said, pouring himself a glass of water. "Dr. Rodriguez would be proud to hear how well he's doing." They rarely talked directly about what had happened that March, but it was always there. A shared understanding that had fundamentally changed their relationship. Sarah was no longer just an employee they liked, and they were no longer just employers who treated her well. They were family, bonded together by a secret that had revealed the depth of their connection. "Dr. Hartwell," Sarah said, folding her newspaper, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had made a different choice that day?" He paused in the doorway, considering her question. "Every day," he said quietly, "and every day, I'm grateful you made the choice you did." "Even though it was wrong?" "Especially because it was wrong," he replied. "Anyone can do the right thing when it's easy, Sarah. It takes someone special to do the right thing when it costs everything." After he left for his run, Sarah sat alone in the kitchen, thinking about right and wrong, about love and sacrifice, about the choices that define who we are. She had stolen nearly $50,000 from people who trusted her, and she had never been punished for it. Instead, she had been rewarded, honored, and welcomed into a family. The moral complexity of her situation still troubled her sometimes, especially in the quiet hours of the night when she lay in her comfortable bed in the Hartwell house. But then she would remember Michael's laughter echoing through these same halls, and she would know that whatever else she had done, whatever laws she had broken or trust she had violated, she had saved a life. She had chosen love over fear, action over inaction, and that choice had made all the difference. Years later, when people heard this story, they struggled to understand Dr. Hartwell's reaction. Some called it naive, others called it enabling. Some said he should have pressed charges regardless of the motivation, that laws exist for a reason, and exceptions can't be made just because the criminal had good intentions. But those people hadn't seen Sarah Williams sit on their kitchen floor at 4 in the morning, holding their dying son and promising him everything would be all right. They hadn't watched her give up her own future to secure his. They hadn't learned the difference between someone who steals because they want something and someone who steals because someone they love needs something. Dr. James Hartwell, the cardiac surgeon who understood better than most how fragile life could be, had recognized that sometimes the most profound acts of love look exactly like crimes. And sometimes the most important choice a person can make is to see the love instead of the crime. To choose healing instead of punishment. To respond to sacrifice with grace instead of judgment. Sarah Williams had risked everything to save Michael Hartwell's life. In return, the Hartwell family had saved hers, not from legal consequences, but from a lifetime of regret. It was an exchange that couldn't be measured in dollars or calculated by any standard of justice the law might recognize, but it was, in its own complicated way, exactly fair.